Good afternoon.
Good
Are you
afternoon.
Mr. Allegro?
The same, yes.
You are the writer of this book?
I am the writer of that book, yes.
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 Well,
You would like to talk a bit
about
the book? Good.
is that possible?
It
Have you
certainly is. I should be
a
pleased.
couple of minutes?
Will you come in?
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
De filoloog John M. Allegro is een van 's werelds belangrijkste geleerden op het terrein van de Semitische taalwetenschappen en is als officieel Brits vertegenwoordiger sinds 1953 lid van het internationale gezelschap waarheidsvorsers dat de Dode Zeerollen onderzoekt en vertaalt.
Mr. Allegro, thank you for letting us into your house and be and me.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. Because the past few days we have traveled a lot in search for our truth or the truth. Yesterday at the Isle of Majorca we found your book by incident, The Sacred Mushroom,
And the
which has there. And in the plane flying from Majorca to the Isle of Man, we were seated flabbergasted, fastened in our seatbelts, because it's an extraordinary book about religion and the first roots of Judaism, Christianity, and so on. And our first question, I think, should be,
what is religion?
Or what was religion?
That's a big enough question to start off
So
with.
we can rest.
Yeah. I'm one of those people, you know, who think that most of our motivation, most of our thinking derives from our biological origins. The way we evolved is the way we are living and thinking now. And I think this certainly goes for such things as family life and sexual relationships. I think it's also for religion too. I think we have to go back right into the beginnings of how man became man out of the ape stage, to know why he needs a being greater than himself, why he felt insecure. I think we can see this in his evolving from a four-footed creature into a two-footed creature, and he stands up and he looks up across the savannah for the first time and begins to feel that he could be master of all that he surveys, and at the same time begins to feel fearful because he is then at loggerheads with the rest of creation. And the more intelligent he became, the more his brain developed, the more he felt responsibility for running his own life, and at the same time he put himself into opposition with his fellow creatures. And I think at that stage he began to feel more that he needed some support. And I suspect that the first ideas of God were being born in this primitive creature 25 million years ago, where he first stemmed off from the other ape line of descent, as early as that.
Mm-hmm.
And then this has developed later as man became more clever, he became more unsure and began to look for some supporting creature or power in the universe. I think the important thing is that religion is close to sex and is as powerful as sex, you know. I think we underestimate the power of religion. Now and again we see it in its full naked brutality as well as its glory, but there is this other side to religion which I think we see in the Eastern religions more perhaps than we do in our rather conventional Western Christianity. And then we realize how emotionally set Christianity is. It derives from within, you know, as I mean by being biologically motivated.
You're talking about a fertility cult.
The
first
yes.
primitive form was a fertility cult.
That's right.
The first image of mankind, of a god, is a sexual one.
I think it is, yes, I think it is, because when he looks for the origin of creation, I mean, all this is feeling, but then he begins to rationalize and begins to think about this great force and this great creative deity, or whether in the skies or in the earth, male or female, and he thinks of it in human terms. There's no other terms to think it of. So when he thinks of a creator God, he thinks of the creative act in mankind or in animal kind and he relates the two. So he says, well, God creates life on earth by an ejaculation of sperm in the form of rain, which he sees around him every day if he's in a happy country like the Isle of Man where it rains all the time. But, you know, I mean, he sees it happening, he sees it going into the womb of Mother Earth, and he relates the two, and so he sees the creation of Mother Earth, the plants of Mother Earth, as an offspring of God. These are the children of God. And then, of course, you go to another stage, don't you? You go to, talking about my mushroom book, you begin to see how certain plants are more representative of their Heavenly Father than others. And that is those plants that have the power to make alive or to kill, the poison plants or the hallucinatory plants, the drug plants. And if, as in the case of the mushroom, which was always invested with great mystery because it seemed to be born of a virgin birth, if you see this coming out of the ground and you know that if you ate a particular mushroom, it could give you visions of heaven and God, you may well believe that this was indeed the Son of God. And if it's shaped like a penis, like a phallus, he sees, well, surely this is the little God from whom this sperm emanated in the first place. Certain mushrooms grow in certain places, you know. Those that are used in the South American version of the cult are different from those that were used in, say, ancient Sumer, or those that form the basis of the Soma cult of ancient India. Now, this was almost certainly the Amanita muscaria, as pictured on the front of that book.
It's this one in the more,
yes.
more simple form.
Yes, beautifully portrayed on your wall over there. Yes. Now this has the poison in the under the little warts there. It is a poison, of course, but it can be quite dangerous. But taken in moderation and in certain ways, with certain preparation, this has, I'm told, a hallucinatory effect.
You're told, you don't know it by experience.
I'm not going to try it myself, thank you very much, because it can be quite powerful. But there's no doubt that this particular thing formed the basis of a great many cults of the ancient days. And I think was imported into the Middle East. It was not a native of the Middle East, of course. It only grows in conifers and among conifer forests and birches. But I think it was imported into the Middle East, and in various forms, probably a dried form, was used in many of the ancient religious cults of the Near East, which included, I think, Judaism.
John M. Allegro bestudeerde 30 jaar lang de taalkundige overeenkomsten tussen de oorspronkelijke Hebreeuwse Bijbelteksten en de andere oude talen van het Midden-Oosten. Hij ontdekte dat alle wegen terugleiden naar Mesopotamië en dat de belangrijkste religies zijn gebaseerd op de paddenstoelcultuur van het oude Sumerië. Namen, plaatsen en bepaalde formuleringen in de Bijbel verwijzen rechtstreeks naar de ware oorsprong van het christendom, dat geen oorspronkelijke godsdienst was, maar voortkwam uit een vruchtbaarheidsritus rond de vliegenzwam.
I mean, Christianity isn't always a headache for the historian because it seems so different from what went before. If in fact it can be seen as part of a continuing secret tradition which went on and through the Old Testament stories and some of these old myths and legends that you get in the Old Testament, with roots going right back into ancient Sumer of the 4th century, 4th millennium, and perhaps much earlier than that. The thing was becoming a nicely complete picture, and that's really what the sacred mushroom was about.
Next question is perhaps what is really told in the New Testament?
Well, the story we all know, its face story, is of a rabbi going round saying nice things and comforting things to people and calling people to his name. and telling everybody to be awfully good to one another and love one another and so on. That's the picture that's come over. I think underneath that there are code names being purveyed for the names of the mushrooms, and also invocatory names used in the secret cells that the Romans were always after breaking up, you remember?
Perhaps a better question in that case is, why was the Bible written me? Waarom werd de Bijbel eigenlijk geschreven?
Yes.
Daar gaat hij over. But
Why write it at all?
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Well, I think it was simply a cover story.
Mm-hmm.
I think you see that it was the Gospels that were circulated, not the Pauline letters at first. It was the Gospels that were first circulated in some form. Of course, we haven't got the originals. What we have are traditions of a good deal later time and written in the wrong language, as it were. But the kind of thing which a Roman investigator could pick up anywhere and read about this man with strangely pro-Roman feelings for a Jew at that time, when they were very, very antagonistic towards their political masters, and seemingly crucified on the instigation of the Jews, as the story goes, for reasons that could only but puzzle the Roman masters, you see. There's the picture. But in that story, there are certain passages, certain lines, certain so-called Aramaic phrases, which are given translations like the names of the twins Boanerges, which is supposed to mean sons of thunder. Now, no philologist living could ever find sons of thunder out of a so-called apparent Aramaic name Boanerges. It doesn't mean that. But sons of thunder is a name of the sacred mushroom, the coronium of ancient Greek and Latin.
Mm-hmm.
And the Boanerges is something else, which I've tried to explain in my book. In other words, you have a number of such passages in the New Testament where you have an Aramaic name, and then you have a translation, inverted commas, supposedly a translation, which has never joined up. They've never made sense. Now I think, if you look at that Aramaic name and think, well, perhaps it's not Aramaic, but an early invocatory name, a magic name, which in certain circumstances could be pronounced and made powerful, then right, you purvey that because your center of your cult has been destroyed, as it was. Of course, Jerusalem was destroyed in AD 70. You have a number of cells in the outlying districts around the Mediterranean. You want to keep them in touch. You want to remind them of their secrets, but you daren't purvey it in written form. So what do? You put these names and phrases into a cover story that can be purveyed. And that, I think, is what the New Testament is. In fact, the Lord's Prayer is a good case, because the first words, Our Father who art in heaven, is in Aramaic the equivalent of that magic phrase that came to us in another context, abracadabra. Abracadabra, abadabarakia, in Aramaic would mean Our Father which art in heaven. So that's where abracadabra.
Every child knows.
Every child, yes,
expression.
exactly.
That's
And they
a
have
very old.
it is
secret
very, very old.
form.
And abracadabra is in fact 2nd century AD in its earliest, and it's probably even earlier than that. It is a magic phrase which, used in certain magic circumstances or powerful cultic circumstances, could have a beneficial effect.
Yeah, as we can say that in the beginning, the Christianity is a drug cult. Then we came to the question, what is it now?
Yes.
In moral and ethic.
Yes, quite. And for most people, I suppose, Christianity is a way of life rather than a religion.
Yes,
It's an enormous discrepancy.
Yes.
Yes. Uit elkaar gaan lopen natuurlijk.
Yes, and one wonders how on earth a small, very inward-looking drug cult could become a world religion with
What
such
a power.
Yes, exactly.
What a power. Yes.
As far as the morality of the New Testament is concerned, I would say that this is genuine. But that is, love thy neighbour was the prime ethic of these people. But I think it has to be understood in its original terms. That is, as we see among the Dead Sea Scrolls sect at Qumran, a small in-group of inward-looking people who were needing to love one another for the sake of even maintaining sanity. You know, I mean, you know what it's like if you're living in a small group of in a monastery, and you have to be extremely careful. You get this very much in the Dead Sea Scrolls, in their manual of discipline. You have to be awfully careful about the feelings of the next chap, and not to interrupt, and so on and so forth. Otherwise, a little friction can soon explode, and the whole community falls apart.
Neighbor and distrust
That's right.
everyone else outside the group.
That was
That's
right. Yes, you get
smart.
love thy immediate neighbour, strongly stressed in the Dead Sea
Within the
Scrolls,
secret
within the
of
group.
the
But you could hate the man outside, and the more hate you generated for the man outside, the more you were able to love your neighbour, because the hate and love are the reverse, of the same side of the coin. You know, of the coin. Now, I think if you understand the New Testament ethic in that terms of a small community, where loving is an important aspect, and forgiveness and turning the other cheek is absolutely vital, then I think this makes sense. But it does not really make sense, and it has never really made sense in human terms, of loving the whole world.
What's left over of that origin of Christianity in the church of today? I think perhaps
That's interesting, isn't it?
Because in eerste instantie denk ik dat toch aan bread and wine. That's kind of ritual.
Yes, because that
is that original.
That is not original to the church. That bread and wine sacrament is in the Dead Sea Scrolls already in the pre-Christian time. They talk of the bread and the wine of this messianic banquet, the Christ banquet, when all the followers will be gathered at the foot of the Christ, and they would be partaking of the bread and the wine. But nowhere in Judaism, not even in the Dead Sea Scrolls, do you get this extraordinary idea that the bread and the wine were actually the Christ himself.
It's cannibalism.
It's all cannibalism. But you can see how in a sect which is dedicated to the eating of the Son of God and the becoming of one with the God through consuming the God, the sacred mushroom, that would make sense. If you were distributing among them pieces of the mushroom and they were eating it, they would blow their top or whatever they do, then they would consider that they had become one with God, and there would be a sense in which they were eating the God. And when you look at the Dionysic cults of ancient Greece, it has been suggested that they were eating the mushroom, the sacred mushroom. I think it was Robert Graves put forward this idea that the Maenads, these women, were going screaming in a frenzy through the conifer forest, picking these things and eating them. And I think that when they talk about pulling apart the little forms and the animals that they found in the wood, actually tearing them apart and eating them, you have there a piece of mushroom mythology, because, as I've shown in my book, names like the fawn are mushroom names. And in that case, the fawn, if you look at the names for these little animals, they are centered on the eye, the hemispherical large eye of the fawn and the gazelle and so forth. These again are Sumerian names, as I've shown.
En daar zal ik kunnen we niet even luchtjeschep op zetten? Can we go for a little walk? It's
yes,
fine weather now, and to continue our talk.
Yes? Good idea.
And you'll excuse our English because
it's extremely good.
No.
No mushrooms growing here?
No, no mushrooms, no. Well, only on the grass, inadvertently.
Yeah.
But to continue our story, you've told the cross is now a mushroom.
Yes.
What is the meaning of the cross and crossing in the mushroom story?
Well, because one of the old Hebrew names of the mushroom was the little cross.
The little cross.
And I think myself that the whole crucifixion story, although of course there was crucifixion and it was meted out as a punishment to rebels and so on and so forth, I think the idea of the God being crucified on this piece of wood was made to was a piece of mushroom mythology. They saw the cross as a mushroom shape, you
Yes.
see, and they understood this figure as being splayed out on the cross as the risen mushroom, open wide in it, with its canopy on top. And I suspect that's where it's come from, and that's the origin of the crucifixion motif within the story of the New Testament.
That mushroom is a very strong one, isn't it?
Very strong one. I wouldn't advise anybody to
No.
play with it.
No,
not at all. I wouldn't. But it's a very beautiful thing.
Yes,
But
it
one
is.
can see from that kind of thing how folklore can grow up about it. I mean,
Yes.
the phallic shape,
Yes,
and then
yes,
it
yes.
opens out into a canopy, a little cross, as
Yes.
the Hebrew calls it.
Yes.
And so the stories begin to mount.
Thank you very much, Mr. Allegro.
Thank you for
Most
coming.
you were most kind.
Thank you very
Thank
much
you
for
very
coming.
much.
I'm very pleased. I hope
Thank
it
you.
goes well.
And I'm going to read the whole book now. Because
Yes.
Van de Kat mijn klein stukje gelezen.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you,
you
Mr.
so much.
Allegro.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Mind how you get it.
Yes.
Brits vertegenwoordiger, sinds 1953 lid van het internationale gezelschap waarheidsvorsers dat de Dode Zeerollen onderzoekt en vertaalt.
Mr. Allegro, thank you for letting us into your house, B and me.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. Because the past few days we have traveled a lot in search for our truth or the truth. Yesterday at the Isle of Majorca we found your book by incident, The Sacred Mushroom,
And the
which
cross.
has there. And in the plane flying from Majorca to the Isle of Man, we were seated flabbergasted, fastened in our seatbelts, because it's an extraordinary book about religion and the first roots of Judaism, Christianity, and so on. And our first question, I think, should be,
What is religion?
A four-footed creature into a two-footed creature, and he stands up and he looks up across the savannah for the first time and begins to feel that he could be master of all that he surveys, and at the same time begins to feel fearful because he is then at loggerheads with the rest of creation. And the more intelligent he became, the more his brain developed, the more he felt responsibility for running his own life, and at the same time he put himself into opposition with his fellow creatures. And I think at that stage he began to feel more that he needed some support. And I suspect that the first ideas of God were being born in this primitive creature, 25 million.
or what was religion?
That's a big enough question to start off
So
with.
we can rest.
Yeah. I'm one of those people, you know, who think that most of our motivation, most of our thinking derives from our biological origins. The way we evolved is the way we are living and thinking now. And I think this certainly goes for such things as family life and sexual relationships. I think it's also for religion too. I think we have to go back right into the beginnings of how man became man out of the ape stage, to know why he needs a being greater than himself, why he felt insecure. I think we can see this in his evolving from years ago, where he first stemmed off from the other ape line of descent, as early as that.
Mm-hmm.
And then this has developed later as man became more clever, he became more unsure and began to look for some supporting creature or power in the universe. I think the important thing is that religion is close to sex and is as powerful as sex, you know. I think we underestimate the power of religion. Now and again we see it in its full naked brutality, as well as its glory, but there is this other side to religion, which I think we see in the Eastern religions more perhaps than we do in our rather conventional Western Christianity. And then we
Good afternoon.
Good
Are you
afternoon.
Mr. Allegro?
The same, yes.
You are the writer of this
I
book.
am the writer of that book, yes.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Well,
You would like to talk
a bit about
the book. Good.
the book. Is that possible?
It
Have you
certainly is. I should be
a
pleased
couple
to
of
see you.
minutes?
Will you come in?
Oh,
Oh,
very well.
thank you.
After you, Beek.
Thank you.
De filoloog John M. Allegro is een van 's werelds belangrijkste geleerden op het terrein van de Semitische taalwetenschappen en is als officieel